Hey guys. When I was living in LA, this must have been about 5 years or so ago, I remember seeing groups of Mexicans doing odd jobs, but they were almost completely absent from the homeless population. This one day I was walking home and I saw a bunch of them unloading a truck or something, and I remember thinking, gosh, they are such hardworking people. I don't understand why we just can't give amnesty to the ones that are here. I like to reflect on this memory, it keeps me in check, because it really was not that long ago that I was directing my political compass completely based on my feelings. And I remember what a warm feeling it gave me. Like I was such a good person just for thinking it, even though I didn't bother examining any of the associated implications or costs. In the meantime, I'm sneering at every homeless person that asks me for money because by the time you've been getting hounded day in and out for like a year, your charity is eroded. A huge number of the homeless in LA are black, and I had literally no cognitive dissonance about this, even though it seems fairly obvious that employing immigrants, particularly unskilled Mexicans, for labor directly displaces the most impoverished and unskilled native demographics, black teenagers in particular. I didn't think this deeply about it because I had already made an emotional determination. I've done a few videos that are 101 style where I introduce the basics of a topic. I did this about cultural Marxism, a few economics crash courses. I found that these do really well and I like making them because it gives a quick rundown that isn't overwhelming for someone that is not particularly well versed on a given issue, as I was not just 5 years ago. For the purpose of this video, I just want to focus on the US immigration policy and history. A whole series could be made about the migrant crisis in Europe and their immigration issues, but in light of Trump's RAISE Act, I wanted to remain a bit more focused. That being said, many of the problems with immigration are universal, and the analysis can be broadly applied to most countries with large, unassimilated immigrant populations and an inability to control their borders. I know this is a trite argument, but I still hear it all the time. We're a nation of immigrants. I also feel like we have heard conservatives debunk this a million times, but I still have to address it. The earliest settlers, even understanding that there were clashes with Native Americans, were not immigrants. Native Americans were tribal and often nomadic. There were villages, tools, agricultural production, but the tribes were often warring. They did not all share the same values, and they spanned an enormous amount of land the length of the whole country. By the 1500s, the Spanish and French had begun establishing settlements. In 1607, the English founded their first permanent settlement at Jamestown in present-day Virginia. Many were escaping religious persecution, and by 1640, 20,000 Puritans had followed the Pilgrims and settled in Massachusetts. It was also around this period that Africans started to be transported here as slaves. 50 to 100,000 Irishmen, around 75% Catholic, came to the United States in the 1600s, and 100,000 more arrived in the 1700s. This was the longest immigration era and lasted until the American Revolution in 1776. During this era, the immigrants were almost completely of Northern European descent. Most were British, and the remaining were almost all German and Dutch. Of the 13 colonies, almost all were privately funded by British settlers, included complete multi-generational families, and English was the primary trade language. Further, these people shared an adventurous, entrepreneurial, independent streak that simply had to be there to make the horrible and dangerous process of immigrating at this time more bearable. Even with all these similarities, they were homogenous in that they were all white and Christian, except for the slaves. They still had conflicts over expansion, resources, religious sentiments, territory disputes. There was a large cultural fissure just between white Quakers, Baptists, Lutherans, Catholics, and they were all from countries in Northern Europe that were very near one another. Not to mention that they shared the experience of an arduous journey, the resulting isolation, perhaps rejection from their ancestral home, or the entrepreneurial nature and desire for a better life. If you ask me, that seems like a ton of stuff to have in common, yet still there was a lot of conflict. There was little immigration from about 1770 to 1830, and well over 75,000 people left during this period to go home or to emigrate to Canada. But between 1850 and 1930 alone, 25 million Europeans came to America. Life was not the same for all immigrant populations. As you already know, the Irish were treated terribly, were denied jobs, they were viewed as the lowest class of individuals. This sentiment was a reaction to their arrival in mass numbers. They didn't have a lot of skills. They brought some disease, they practiced an alien religion and had different allegiances, and they committed a lot of crime. There was a large pushback by the native population in the mid-1890s as immigration increased competition for jobs. Organizations began to form to press Congress to curtail immigration. Shortly after the Civil War, states started to pass their own immigration laws, which prompted the Supreme Court in 1875 to rule that immigration is a federal issue. Assimilation, or rather the lack thereof, was causing serious cultural problems, so Congress passed the Emergency Quota Act in 1921 as well as the Immigration Act of 1924, both of which aimed at restricting Southern European and Russian immigration. Not only were quotas developed based on nation of origin, but it gave preference to immigrants from Central, Northern, and Western Europe who were doing a better job of assimilating. Immigration from Russia and Southern Europe was severely limited, and immigration from Asia was barred entirely. Whether by legislation, reduced incentives, war, economic downturn, each major surge of immigration in our country was followed by a multi-decade period where immigration slowed drastically. During this period, due to social, political, and legal forces, immigrants were absolutely forced to assimilate or to return to their home countries, which hundreds of thousands of people did. Due to the drive to create a new life, the knowledge brought with them of farming and manufacturing, a middle-class society brought together multiple European ethnic groups under a common culture. There was actual cohesion. This all changed in 1965 when the Immigration and Naturalization Act was passed as part of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs. The bill abolished the national origins quota system that had regulated the ethnic composition of immigration to each group's existing percentage of the population. It also gave preference to individuals with specialized skills. It included clauses for family reunification, including extended family, and it capped immigration in the Western Hemisphere for the first time. But there was a largely overlooked provision of this bill. Immediate family members of U.S. citizens and political refugees face no quotas. Of course, this was the intent, and Democrats had very successfully exploited the revolutionary spirit of the civil rights era, claiming that these immigration quotas were part of the same racial underpinnings that were causing civil unrest. Democrats would still claim that. It seems fairly obvious to me that they just wanted to ensure a government-dependent, low-skill voting bloc that provides cheap labor to be at their behest in perpetuity. During the signing ceremony, LBJ said, "The bill that we sign today is not a revolutionary bill. It does not affect the lives of millions. It will not reshape the structure of our daily lives or really add importantly to either our wealth or our power." Ted Kennedy said, "It will not upset the ethnic mix of our society." I don't really need to tell you what happened, but I will. America has undergone massive demographic changes. The welfare state, which is disproportionately supporting immigrant communities, has become so bloated that it may just sink our entire economy. There's an estimated 30 million illegal immigrants in this country. And like the 19th century Irish wave, both legal and illegal immigrants have driven down wages and caused unemployment in the most destitute sectors of our native population. A member of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, Peter Kirsanow, said, "Black males are more likely to experience competition from illegal immigrants. What happens is you eliminate the rungs on the ladder because a sizable number of black men don't have access to entry-level jobs. It is not just the competition and the unemployment of blacks. It also depresses the wage levels. About 6 in 10 adult black males have a high school diploma or less, and black men are disproportionately employed in the low-skilled labor market, where they are more likely to be in labor competition with immigrants. Illegal immigration to the United States in recent decades has tended to depress both wages and employment rates for low-skilled American citizens, a disproportionate number of whom are black men. Expert economic opinions concerning the negative effects range from modest to significant. Those panelists that found modest effects overall nonetheless found significant effects in industry sectors such as meatpacking and construction. The black community is doing very badly right now. Record levels of single motherhood, high unemployment, high crime. The left has sold out the black community to secure them as a voting bloc, having disenfranchised them terribly, then have convinced them to endorse a cause that is directly displacing them. And perhaps worst of all is that we've become a fractured nation where people vote almost exclusively based on their ethnic interests. Citizenship used to be a privilege granted when you had proven that your primary identity and interests were wholly American. There was legislation like the 1907 Expatriation Act, which declares that an American woman who marries a foreign national loses her citizenship, or like the 1862 Homestead Act, which provided free plots of up to 160 acres for Western settlers who agreed to develop and live on the land for at least 5 years. People were punished for dividing their civic interests with the loss of citizenship, and they were rewarded when they invested themselves, their livelihoods, their very beings into cultivating the land. That is why this worked. There was a staunch, enforceable incentive program that drew people from similar cultures and backgrounds that had aligned interests and values. When we began incentivizing unskilled third world people, of course this all changed, and now we're in a real jam because we have an intergenerational issue and it is still being seen as a racial civil rights issue. Communities are fractured because there is a virtually unassimilated giant proportion of the population that has a disparate culture and no incentive to integrate in the way that Europeans did. Trump's proposal is fine, I guess. The proposed system contained in a Senate bill would replace one largely based on extended family ties with one that prioritizes education, English language proficiency, age, vocational skills, and high paying job offers, as well as considering any criminal record and possible national security risks. I mostly agree with this. I like the English language proficiency clause. Of course, it doesn't do anything about illegal immigration, and although it may cut legal immigration by half, I think a near complete moratorium of many decades is needed, more severe than the lulls that followed our previous immigration surges. And this needs to be done in tandem with mass deportations. As far as those refugees and immigrants that we do allow in, there's no reason that we cannot have a preference for Europeans again, especially as we see their countries fall into decline, as well as for South African refugees and other persecuted groups that would integrate well into Western culture. We are allowed to be discerning because we have nearly destroyed our country with this experiment of multiculturalism. We have to walk it back. For some reason in this country, people act like it is a right, not a privilege, to just move to whatever country you want to. This is a uniquely Western view. I cannot just up and move to Japan or even to Mexico. They'd be like, get out. I can't own land in most countries, and some, even if you're married to a native for 2 decades, you will not get citizenship. This attitude that all people deserve to live in whatever country they desire is a manifestation of Western decadence. And I have to say that even though it benefits our country tremendously, I don't feel great about this idea of taking the best and the brightest from third world countries. Those impoverished countries need those people. They rely on them. Having their productivity may be the difference between life and death for a huge number of people. You have to ask yourself, if someone is smart and has potential, does that entitle them to become a citizen of a foreign country? If you answer yes, which many leftists probably would, you're walking into a minefield because you just made an argument that IQ is tied to ethnic background, or to minimum culture, and productivity. And you've made a judgment about what constitutes a valuable human being and how they can be most beneficial to you. It's a real quagmire. People have a right to govern their homelands as they see fit, to reject immigration that hurts their native population, or, frankly, to reject immigration for any reason that they see fit. Any reason. We are not under obligation to house, feed, and provide opportunities for people that do not share our values or our customs. No country is, and we do not hold other countries to this standard. But we are under obligation to help improve the conditions of the Black community through bettering their employment prospects. We are also under obligation to protect our native population and their interests above all else. Let me know what you think in the comments section, what needs to be done in terms of reform, deportation, social shifts to walk back the demographic and cultural damage that has been done. Your comments have been really interesting lately, so let me know. Thanks, and I'll see you on Friday. Bye!